So, welcome to author vlog number 3. I am Coco Mingolelli, and this is Sara. What's your Tumblr name, Sara?
The Wicked Witch of Ohio.
Because she comes from Ohio. Very original. And why the Wicked Witch?
Well, partially the Wicked Witch of the Midwest is already taken, so that's why it's Ohio. Also, that it's a shout out to my other big fandom, Wicked, Oz, whatever version you care to take from that. And I do a little, witchcraft in my own life, so it just seemed a good mix of fandom and where I am, and what I do. So.
And this is Tasha. What's your Tumblr name, Tasha?
Dragon Knight 1990.
And why is it Dragon Knight 1990?
I like dragons. The knight is to sort of...
Is it a nod to your medieval cosplaying?
It's a nod to the medieval, not cosplaying, but I do specialize in medieval history, and it's sort of a way to exude
1066. 1492.
Yes, 1090.
Yeah, 1096. 1066.
1066. Sorry.
Moving on.
The Norman invasion. Bill the bastard. Fuck you. You ruined.
And already I'm having to censor this.
It's okay, Courtney edits it.
And the 1990 is because that was the year that I was born, because Dragon Knight was already taken, and I figured, why not? Yeah, very original.
And as most of you know, my Tumblr name is Coco Mingo X. It's just my last name shortened, and X marks the spot. I don't know why that's so funny to me. Actually, I do know, but it is not rated for YouTube. Some people in the fandoms online gave me the nickname of the Mingok, so most people pronounce it that way. Anyway, I am the author of Become Incarnate, as many watching already know, and tonight we are exploring positive and negative representation in the media, books, movies, etc., for the queer community, the lesbian community, bisexual, all of the umbrella terms. And I say queer, and I don't mean it to be in an offensive way. I identify as queer, so if that word bothers you, I am sorry. Whatever identity that you would like to use in the umbrella LGBTQIA communities is cool. But we'll be talking about that type of representation in the media. And then I'd like to discuss positive and negative and accurate representation of mental illness in the media. They were two things that my followers, both on Tumblr and on Goodreads, asked me to discuss in this third vlog. So we have our special guests here. Sara's up from Ohio, and Tasha is here. Tasha actually lives with us. So you'll see more of Tasha as the weeks go on. So Sara, I know that we discussed having you start out with the topic of, accurate and fair and positive and negative portrayals of LGBTQIA folks in the media. So why don't you go ahead and start about what that means to you, just like the entire subject.
So there's definitely more data available for television. It's easier to track than books, between, I guess, record keeping for the books for olden times, and also now with self-publishing, that can be harder to track as well. And of course, the spike in positive queer representations really only in the last 20 years or so. I mean, like, you can, back when movies, you know, there were, you know, gay and lesbian, you know, and other non-conforming and their characters in movies even in the 30s. But then, of course, you know, censorship, you know, flash forward later, McCarthy, I mean, you name it, that there were lots of rules, if not laws, against that material being publicly available.
And disseminated across state lines and country lines.
Or when it did, it was always in a negative thing, you know, it was that the bad character was, you know, the queer one, or it was like, you know, or they always died, or just things like that. Never really good.
The tragic story of the female introvert.
Yeah. And then the maybe a turning point was actually the AIDS crisis of the 80s, where a lot more people maybe realized that kind of we're everywhere, that your family members, you know, were gay, you know, or lesbian or any other sort of identity, and especially with the gay men, therefore, endanger is not the right way to put it, but that, you know, this could affect their family, not just, you know, oh, that bad guy on the movie or television, but and like, and also more public figures talked about it when they were trying to get the government to do things with funding, and then it actually kind of just, because media also is a good representation of kind of what the public and what's normal in society, and so that's where
Current societal norms,
became more acceptable for that to be on TV, because it became a little more acceptable to be that in real life. And then, of course, there's been a big spike, saying, jumping forward a little bit more to now, it is much more common that, you know, and it's even in kids shows. I mean, like Glee, Fresh Off the Boat just had a gal come out, and so that's always good for kids growing up to see themselves on television and have it be just part of the character, and, you know, maybe have a story but not be like the focus, the plot point. And so I think that's really important, because, like, for me, that might be part of why I didn't figure it out for so long. Not that I was like kept from gay material, just it wasn't as big even in the 90s. And we were basically the same age. So like, we grew up on the same TV, and like, it was there, but you had to find it. So
yeah, when I did find it, it was always
subtle
on the Lifetime channel, and it was very sad, and I ended up crying. So yeah.
And so I think the kids have it a little better that nowadays, is that, you know, they'll be like, oh, it's okay to be this, you know, I'm 13, I can figure this out now instead of when you're 24, but so.
That's some tragic coming out story where their parents abandoned them, or they died of AIDS, or they, you know, just died.
Yeah, I mean, that's
some random thing.
That's still an issue.
Such a
#the
trope.
100. So
Yeah,
that's still an issue that's not always good. That even with the increase of it, representation, there's still, it's always good before committing to a show or a book or anything with queer stuff in it. Do take a step back and think if it's an honest attempt by the show or author, instead of
queer baiting.
Yeah, queer baiting, or just unnecessary, like, negative plot device, or just negative stuff. I mean, again, the whole, like, Lex, you know, Clexa, you know, like, thing, you know.
The 100 was heartbreaking because they developed that relationship over so many episodes, over 2 seasons, and had positive and negatives, real accurate portrayal of a relationship. And to just have Clark and Lexa finally get together, and then 2 episodes later, you know, Lex is dead. That was so heartbreaking, because they knew that they had a huge fan base, and they knew that it was helping people. And, you know, even if endgame was that Lexa had to die in order for that plot arc to finish, so that Lexa could help Clark in ending Allie, I guess, and the City of Light. it didn't need to be 2 episodes later.
Yeah, didn't need it. Didn't need kind of a lame death for the character. So.
Yeah.
And right after their lovemaking scene.
Yeah. So
It was like what?
It was
2 minutes.
It was like it was like being cut like oh bam like
You're
it was
dead.
not 2 episodes.
It kind of gave me like the flashbacks from watching shows during my childhood about, you know, oh, look at this happy lesbian couple. Oh, they're fighting against the man. They're fighting against society that says that they can't adopt or they can't get married or they can't do this, and they're winning, and oops, one of them gets lupus and dies, and it's horrible, and there's very few, I shouldn't say there's very few happy endings with regards to television shows and books, I'm finding, in queer representation, regardless of which part of the rainbow we're talking about, which is kind of why I think it's so important that people from the rainbow umbrella kind of write their own stories and really become the voices of their generation. And if we want accurate portrayal, I think that we have to start telling it ourselves. And you mentioned a good thing with the self-publishing, because anyone can write. You can write. You can write. You can write. You write. We all write. So if you want your story to be told and you have a vision for, you know, positive queer representation, it is so easy nowadays. You don't have to wait for a publishing deal. You can do it yourself. If you want to send scripts to, you know, Los Angeles, that's even become a lot easier. And people just send, you know, 500 copies out and it starts to gain traction. Or you notice a lot more, especially with the YA like subgenre, the stories are being turned into movies.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
Out, so
Yeah. And even not YA, they'll turn it into YA for TV or for movies when it was more adult oriented at first. I've noticed that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because then it can reach a wider audience, as movies usually do.
And help the youth, like.
Well, not just youth, because there's adults that don't feel safe coming out because of where they live or their religion, or they've been sheltered their entire lives and they're scared.
But the more that we get out there, the more access everyone will have to it, and hopefully they'll come to the realization sooner rather than later, and live their teen and young adult lives in misery when they don't necessarily have to.
Well, also, I think it's easier nowadays to call people out on the bull crap. Well, like after the 100 incident, like
Tumblr and Twitter.
Yeah, like the fandom bought billboards about like, you know, we need to end the bury your gays trope, you know, and I think a lot of people who, you know, normal, you know, straights, etc., like, as they call themselves, but like realize
No,
that
there's no such thing as normal.
True.
Heteronormative.
That, you know, that they realize that, oh yeah, like, and at the time, it's gotten better, but, you know, back when, you know, LGBT characters started showing up on film, that it was way over half that you ended badly still. And that's still a problem that they either just kind of get written off the show, they become a secondary character, or something bad happens.
Well, I think that was a big part of the whole It Gets Better campaign too, because when all queer kids see is, it sucks to be a queer youth, and even in today's society, especially depending on where you live, and then all they see in representation is someone dies, or you don't get respected by your family, or you lose your family, or you lose all of your friends. You kind of think to yourself, well, what do I have to live for, right? Like, that's part of why I think positive and accurate representation is so important, that there can and are positive, healthy relationships that people have that go on to be, great and wonderful and just as fulfilling as a straight relationship or not coming out, more fulfilling than living your life in fear, because there's really never any safety in that, because the truth will out. I mean, everyone knows that, so it doesn't matter if it happens tomorrow or 10 years down the line, after your mom pops off, that you can finally come out to everyone. And then everyone says, well, we already knew, and then you just wonder why you waited so long. So it's
Kind of like that new music video by Logic.
Oh, yeah.
The one with the 800 suicide awareness number is the title of the song. But it's centered around a young man coming to terms with being gay as a teenager. But it ends showing him getting married, showing him and his partner with a child.
That was really great. For those that don't know, that voice behind the camera is Courtney, also known by her Tumblr name as Morgan Le Fay in Chains, and she is our illustrious camerawoman for all these lovely vlogs. But she was mentioning the new music video by Logic, featuring other artists, and I'm sorry, very sorry that I don't know the other artists off the top of my head, but the fact that it does portray an honest look at how hard it is to be a gay or queer, lesbian, bi, trans youth in today's society, but that, yes, those hard moments really hurt, and they can seem like they're the end of the world when they're happening. Parents kicking you out, or losing friends or family, and just the fact that sometimes it takes time, and other folks that know that you can be healthy and queer and still be loved and have a very fulfilling life, to say to your family or friends, that's really not cool, and I support that, your son, your daughter, your friend, your brother, sister, I support them, and it's not such a thing anymore because I saw this show, or I read this book.
Well, like you're mentioning the music video, I think that's a big change in the last 15 years, back when MTV still showed music videos, that I don't remember there being a lot of, even if the song didn't really have anything to do with it, I don't remember there being any really queer plots. And now there are, I'm blanking on the names because I'm old and don't listen to the kids' music, but
Lady Gaga.
yeah, but sure.
What's his name? Hosier?
Yeah, Take Me to Church. That was a big one 2 years ago.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's just another little piece of this mainstream.
That one, girls like boys do.
Yeah, that was really big last year.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't want to like that piece of representation, but it meant so much to a lot of the younger girls and women in our generation. I was like, well, if that speaks positively to you, then I'm definitely supportive of that. I don't like comparing lesbian relationships to straight or heterosexual relationships, because while they are both relationships and both able to be happy and healthy, they are not the same, and that's okay. Just because girls like girls like boys doesn't mean that it's kind of like separate but equal. It's like, okay, we have a water fountain over here for white folks, we have a water fountain over here for black folks. They're both the same water, well, they appear to be the same water fountain. They're supposed to be the same water fountain. They both have water, but one of them is kind of crappy, and the other one is pristine and shining. And it's what that music video felt like to me when that she had to physically fight off a guy to prove her love for her girlfriend, and
It was problematic, but yeah, I
yeah,
had my reaction
problematic
to that.
favorite.
I liked the reaction more maybe than the
Yeah.
video stuff. I'm like, oh,
I was proud of the
support
reaction to
this,
see
yeah.
people saying, "Yeah, that's awesome," and it's a step in the right direction, and recognizing the artist for trying. So
Or
that was good.
Macklemore and Mary Lambert, The Same Love.
Same Love was like huge, especially during the marriage equality movement. The marriage equality movement was really a big thing during my generation. I say my generation because technically, viewers, I'm not a millennial. Most of you know how old I am, but I'm not revealing that on this. But not being a millennial, I want to say at least half of the millennial generation has existed in the time when marriage equality has already existed in some way, shape, or form, whether it was another country, starting out with some of the European countries,
Europe and
even some of
Canada.
the states, and then finally culminating for us Americans with the Supreme Court ruling. But that was a huge fight for my generation, starting out with just having the right to be out and safe and employed, and that's still a fight in several states. Marriage covered such a gamut of rights, the safety of being able to be there with your spouse when they die and inherit, things after they pass, and protecting them and their health when they were in need. So many things. 100,000 rights, I think it was something. And comparing, whole milk and skim milk was great when Ruth Bader Ginsburg did that. It's kind of like the separate but equal thing that I just mentioned. They are both milk, but they are different, but one cannot be less quality than the other. Otherwise, it's no longer fair.
I want to say ABC, that miniseries, When We Rise, actually
Yeah.
covered that really well. Like all the other rights, not just the marriage. Like this is what our relationships being equal is about. Like,
I really liked that series for its accurate portrayal of some of the problematic things that happened in the lesbian community in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s, and I really liked that it showed that it's very hard for queer people of color to be out to a lot of people, because not only are they dealing with systemic racism already, but then dealing with homophobia or transphobia on top of that is really dangerous. And it comes from both sides. It's coming from their community, and it's coming double time from whites.
no, that's definitely.
So what's the statistic? Like they're twice as likely to
Experience
assault
based on their sexual orientation, which is awful.
Yeah.
Or the trans woman, killed every year. Like a lot of that list are women
Or
of
trans
color.
women of color,
And that it's a problem. So
between all the races other than white, it's crazy.
It's a stark difference between the two. I don't know the exact statistics off the top of my head, but
Well, I think the baseline in that it comes down to religion, and we could go on and on about religion and how that interplays with that on another week if viewers would like us to discuss that. But moving on, we mentioned the Logic video that was released not too long ago, that song with the National Suicide Hotline as the song title, which I thought was pretty ingenious, because if you hear it enough on the radio, it just kind of gets encoded in your head. So if you want to talk to anyone, we're going to put the number down on the bottom of this video just to remind you. And we really recommend that you go watch that video, because I thought it was really awesome. And to be honest, I did not want to like that song when I first listened to it. I thought it was really, And I don't say triggering in the way that everyone likes to smear everyone else for. I say triggering in the honest sense that when you're listening to a song or you're listening to a person talking about a subject, that it can be severely psychologically triggering to hear, I don't want to live anymore, I just want to die. And I'm really careful about listening to stuff like that and having that around myself for that reason. So when I was listening to the beginning of it on the radio, I was like, I don't want this. And I changed the station, and then it just kept coming on. And Courtney said, no, you really, I didn't want to like it at first either, but then I looked at the lyrics and I watched the video. You just got to give it a moment to switch tracks, and then it shows the other side. It shows that it does get better. So I did watch the video and I listened to the lyrics and I read them. It was helpful for me to read the lyrics as the song was playing, because then your eyes can skip ahead and say, it's okay, the song's gonna get better, kind of like your life. But speaking of portrayal of mental illness in the media, and kind of branching off of positive and negative and accurate queer representation in the media, Tasha would like to talk about representation of mental illness. And there's tons, so many movies and books about folks with mental illness, but I want to say a vast majority of them are not accurate whatsoever, and they're very negative and scary. Like we were discussing before we did the vlog, that a number of the portrayals are for horror films.
Yeah, most of the ones that I've seen are strictly horror. Like, I think Pick was one of the first ones that I really read or saw that was not only accurate, but painted it in a really a happy tone, but
You have some intense chapters.
honest, where I felt like, as someone who struggles with mental illness and struggling with no one could love me, no one should love me, and then seeing how Mallory and Dawn end up together and happy and relatively in a healthy relationship by the end of the book.
Well, and I think that, if we're going to talk about that specific representation being Peccata and Carne, it's an honest portrayal of some forms of mental illness. Most readers realize from reading the book that Mallory does have dissociative identity disorder. But I don't think what a lot of people realize is that Dawn is clinically depressed at the beginning of the book. And so their relationship is not healthy at the beginning of the book. And for, I don't want to say it bothers me when people say, oh, it's all sunlight and
It's
roses
not.
and rainbows. It's not, and I didn't want it to be an inaccurate portrayal of mental illness, but I also didn't want it to be an inaccurate portrayal of relationships at all, because I feel like a lot of people in our generation, the last two generations, have this idea of love and relationships that is that we have to own each other, or that we have to be each other's everything, and that's just impossible for one person.
Unhealthy.
It's unhealthy.
Some of the heteronormative media does not help that.
No, it really doesn't. It really enforces that, you must kill yourself in order to give to your partner. If they kill themselves, then you just, I guess, switch and then feed upon each other in this kind of like never-ending circle of self-destruction, and that's not healthy. And I wanted to, explore that, that no, it's not healthy, and that you have to get help. And in the book, they're kind of both forced to get help.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
because
Dawn
circumstances kind
yeah.
of force them.
Dawn doesn't seek psychiatric help in this book, and that'll be explored more in the sequel, but because she goes on to be a nurse.
Yeah.
But you know, there needs to be accurate portrayal, and it's okay to have a happy ending as long as the way that you get there is accurate, and it doesn't say that all relationships are 100% happy all the time, or they're 100% healthy all the time, because they're not. That's just not reality.
No, and that's a good part about your book and other well-written, sources, is that there are points in that story where you're like, ooh, what's going to happen here? It's going to fall apart. And I mean, and that's real life. Like, there are bad days and bad episodes, and but you work through it. So
Yeah.
Well, that's important to touch upon with representation, both with mental illness and with queer representation, is that I thought a lot of people, I think that a lot of people really want to jump down show writers and just writers' throats, period, over, queer baiting and inaccurate portrayal and negative portrayal, that some folks go too far because they want it all to be positive, and that's not the way that life works. People are people, and people are not infallible. They have tics, they have mental illness, they have problems, they have drama, and that doesn't mean that their being queer or their being mentally ill causes that drama or is in some way always connected to that drama, but it still exists. So we can't just throw the baby out with bathwater and say, well, all representation must be positive from now on, and I will not accept any accurate portrayal, because accurate includes both positive and negative, right? As long as it's accurate. That's like what I would like to see is accuracy, just real life.
yeah, when the negative might not be the right word for it, but when the kind of darker side of that reality gets presented. As long as it's done correctly, that's the important part.
Yeah.
Because mental illness, it's dark. I mean,
It can be.
Depends on what you have, but there are days that I'm just curled up on my bed, very much like Mallory. And
We have to understand that a lot of mental illness is the brain's reaction to trauma to protect said brain and to protect you as a person.
I mean, statistically, 1 in 5 adults are diagnosed with a mental illness every year, and that's just what's diagnosed, let alone
what exists.
what exists without getting a diagnosis, because of the stigma that people have to seeking help. And that really needs to stop in our society.
And not just our society, I just think around the globe that, mental illness is illness, just like physical illness, and it requires care and it requires support, and both medical care and psychiatric, because some psychiatric disorders also include physical symptoms. So I don't think it's fair to, separate it from physical ailments, or just, to treat it like something that doesn't exist because it exists in someone's head. Saying it's all in your head is such a misnomer, because technically it is, but that doesn't mean it does not affect every aspect of your life. That does not mean it does not exist. Your thoughts, your dreams, your hopes, they all exist in your head. They're just part of us.
If you take a scan of someone who, say, doesn't have PTSD versus has it, their brain
They've
scans
noticed
look
that
completely different.
Yeah, your brain will alter itself to protect you.
Or even schizophrenia, your brain just looks different under a scan. It's
Hereditary schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Because there's hereditary and non-hereditary, but hereditary schizophrenia shows very well on contrast CTs when certain areas of the brain are lit up, as it were, by stimuli. So, yeah. Some movies that, you know, I grew up with were really, really problematic with regards to the portrayal of mental illness. I want to, like, you know, like we said before, a vast majority existed in the horror subgenre. Rosemary's Baby, you know. I actually...
High Tension.
Well, High Tension, it covers two completely different psychiatric disorders. And one very problematically, so I don't even want to touch that one.
Yeah.
It is one of my very problematic favorites, I'll be honest. But definitely not accurate.
No, it
Or
actually
at
made
least
me
we hope not.
more scared of.
It made
some
you
of
more
my-
scared of sociopathic people who also have gender identity disorder and dissociative identity disorder all in one person. Yeah, that is pretty scary. I mean,
Yeah.
all of those things just like forming a nexus in one brain. I'm sure there's people out there that have all three of those disorders and their life is not easy and they're like, could you not? Could
See, this is part of the stigma is with horror or having it be like a, you know, negative plot point is that that's othering
Yeah.
people with a mental illness and
Yeah.
And it just makes us less likely to seek help or even be open about our mental illness because people are like, oh, you have XYZ, we're going to ostracize you because of it.
Or that you're not capable of having a full and healthy life or capable of completing your duties as, you know, your job.
Like I have
a lot
to
of
hide it
discrimination.
from my work that I'm seeking help because I do not want to get fired.
You now live in a state where that's illegal. She forgets. But it's your choice whether or not to share that, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, you shouldn't have to. But the stigma, I think, plays a huge part into that. Like, if we treated it like, geez, I got chicken pox, I can't come in, the kids are gonna catch it. Of course they'd say, well, please don't come in. Or please don't give it to the office, please stay home. Don't, you know, if we say I need a mental health day, I think that bosses, employers should realize that mental health days are extremely useful in increasing productivity, because if you have an unhappy worker coming into work, not only is their work going to suffer, but their mood affects everyone around them. And I say mood, and I know that mood and mental illness are not, you know, mutually exclusive things.
They kind of play into each
They
other.
they can play into each other,
Especially with depression and anxiety.
Oh
And
yeah, like if you're gonna have a big presentation that day and you have generalized anxiety and you are really not having a good day and you really need to stay home and just have a calm day, but your boss says, nope, if you don't come into work, I'm gonna fire you. So you go in and you totally screw up the presentation. You're putting other people's jobs on the line, you're putting your job on the line. The guilt, like, that's so unfair to the person with mental illness, because if they had called in and said, you know, I have chicken pox, or I have, you know, something that I don't want spreading to the office, they would say, oh geez, that's, you know, really crappy, we'll reschedule the presentation to next week, hope you're feeling better, make sure to give us a doctor's note. And I'd say that's fair. I don't understand why it's such a big deal to do that for mental illness, except that people don't want to appear weak, or they don't want to appear accepting of weak. And I think that's a societal thing that's happening now. Even with physical illness and physical disability, they don't want, they're pushing people into, like you said, the other, they're othering people, making it very difficult for people that aren't your average Joe to have a life. I'd be so secretive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not all about that. No.
But as far as more positive representation, most recently, I think it was Girl Interrupted that really caught my attention as far as the accurate portrayal of not only mental illness, but how the mentally ill were treated. And so, when was that movie set? In the 60s?
Late 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, that continued up until the early 90s. That kind of institutionalization, and in some states it still exists, but it's under a religious umbrella that's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, looking at American Horror Story Asylum, looking at the abuses that took place.
Asylum's another very problematic favorite for me, but I will give the writers of American Horror Story kudos for not making folks with mental illness seem to be any different than the folks that were taking care of them. I guess that everyone has their own problems and their own backstories, and that the mental illness wasn't the problem.
Yeah,
it wasn't the backstory.
Story, yeah.
It
was part of it.
Yeah, because
It
they
was
were
a
in
layer
the asylum,
of it.
and some of them weren't even, by today's standards, mentally ill. Some of them were, developmentally disabled, and some of them were gay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, back then that was institutionalizable offense to be queer in that day and age, and still is in some countries, unfortunately. So I'd like to wrap things up here for tonight, since we're kind of getting a little long in the time frame of the vlog here, but I would really enjoy your submissions of ideas for the next vlog that we're going to do. Sarah has to head back to Ohio, unfortunately, in the morning.
Sadness, but
Yes, but Tasha's always around, and maybe someday we'll have Courtney on. And if you would like to, I guess, host, or if you would like your comments included in the next vlog, please feel free to comment on your reblogs, or comment by using the comment button either on Tumblr or on YouTube or even on Goodreads, as this will be posted in all three places. So have a good night, and we'll see you later. Bye.